When I saw my daughter-in-law hurl that heavy suitcase into the lake, something inside me froze. The splash echoed across the still water, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. She looked around quickly, eyes darting left and right before walking back to her car as if nothing had happened. But I knew something was wrong. You don't drive to the lake at dawn, throw a suitcase into the water, and leave smiling. Not unless you're hiding something. My hands trembled as I crouched behind a tree, watching her taillights disappear down the foggy road. I wasn't supposed to be there. She didn't know I had followed her. But the night before, I had overheard her whispering on the phone, her voice shaking, saying something about no one ever finding out. I couldn't sleep after that. I had to know what she was hiding. What secret could make her risk everything? I'm not the kind of woman who meddles in other people's affairs. I've always believed family should be built on trust and respect. But ever since my son married her, something in our home had changed. My son, Daniel, used to call me every day. He'd stop by after work, sometimes just to have tea and talk. But after the wedding, he became distant, colder. He stopped visiting alone. And when he did come, he'd glance at her before answering even the simplest of questions. I thought maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just marriage adjusting him. But then little things started happening. My jewelry box moved from my room, money missing from my purse, strange tension in their voices whenever I entered the room. And then the biggest one, Daniel stopped calling altogether. So when I saw her sneaking out of their house that morning, clutching that suitcase with both hands, I followed. Something told me this was the key to everything. The lake was isolated, quiet, and she didn't think anyone would see her. But I did. I saw every second. I saw the relief in her eyes as the suitcase sank, and that relief haunted me. Standing there, hidden in the trees, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to run after her, to demand answers. But something stronger stopped me. The need to know the truth before I confronted her. I waited until she was gone, the silence around me almost suffocating. Then I stepped toward the lake's edge. The morning mist clung to my skin. The water rippled gently, as if mocking me. I stared at the dark spot where the suitcase had disappeared, my reflection trembling on the surface, and I whispered to myself, "What have you done, Emma?" That was the moment everything changed.
I wasn't always this suspicious, you know. I used to believe love could change people, that kindness could fix anything broken. I raised Daniel alone after his father passed away in a car accident when Daniel was only 12. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. He was my reason to keep moving, my purpose. When he got a good job at an architecture firm, I felt like all my sacrifices had finally meant something. Then he met Emma. She was charming, at least at first, beautiful in a polished city kind of way, always dressed perfectly, hair never out of place. She smiled sweetly and called me Mom before the wedding, bringing me flowers and pretending to care about the stories I told. I wanted to believe she loved Daniel for the good man he was, but something about her smile always felt rehearsed, as if she was performing a role. Daniel was so in love, though, that I pushed those thoughts aside. I told myself maybe I was just being overprotective. After the wedding, they moved into Daniel's house, just a few miles from mine. At first, everything seemed fine. She invited me for dinner, and though the conversations were polite, I could sense she didn't like my presence much. One evening, I noticed the way she tightened her jaw when Daniel complimented my old recipe. It was small, barely noticeable, but I saw it. Then slowly the invitation stopped. When I called, she'd always say Daniel was busy or resting, or that it wasn't a good time. Weeks turned into months. I told myself he was just caught up in married life. Then one day, Daniel came to see me, alone. I'll never forget the look on his face. Pale, tired, and distant. He barely touched the tea I made. I asked if everything was okay, and he said yes, but his eyes told me otherwise. When I asked about work, he said he'd taken a short break. That was odd. Daniel never took breaks. He loved his job. But before I could ask more, he stood up and said, "Emma's waiting. I should go." He hugged me lightly, as if something inside him was already pulling away. After that, I saw him less and less. Sometimes I'd drive by his house, pretending to be passing through, and I'd see Emma's car in the driveway, but never his. Lights off for days. No movement. I began to worry, truly worry. Then one evening, I stopped by and announced. Emma opened the door with a startled look, blocking my view inside. She said Daniel had gone on a work trip and wouldn't be back for a while. Her tone was sharp, like I had no right to ask. I remember the coldness in her eyes that night. It made my stomach twist. Weeks passed and Daniel didn't call. No messages, no updates. I began having nightmares, him calling out for help, drowning, trapped somewhere. I'd wake up in a sweat, heart racing. When I tried calling his office, they said he hadn't been to work in almost a month. That was when the fear turned to dread. I went to their house again, but Emma wasn't there. The curtains were drawn tight, the mailbox overflowing with unopened letters. And then one night, I heard it, the muffled sound of someone crying from inside when I knocked. I called out Daniel's name, but no answer, just silence. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened, greeting me with that same perfect smile. "You must have imagined it," she said sweetly. But I knew what I'd heard. From that day, I started paying closer attention. I noticed she always left the house around the same time on Wednesdays, always carrying that same dark suitcase. Once I tried to ask about it, and she laughed, saying she was donating old clothes to charity. But when I offered to help, her expression changed instantly. Her smile froze. "No need," she said sharply. "I can handle it." And then came that night, the phone call. I had woken up to get a glass of water when I heard her voice through the thin walls of my small house next door. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her tone was panicked, trembling. "It has to stay hidden," she said. "No one can ever find out." My heart dropped. I leaned closer to the window, holding my breath. "If she suspects anything," she whispered, "I'll take care of it." That was the moment I knew. I had to follow her. The next morning, she left earlier than usual, that same suitcase in hand. I trailed behind her car, staying far enough that she wouldn't notice. She drove through winding roads, past the old mill, until she reached the lake. I watched her from behind the trees as she threw that suitcase into the water. And now here I was, standing on that damp, misty shore, realizing my life, and maybe Daniel's, would never be the same again. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was strong. I was going to find out what was in that suitcase, even if it destroyed me.
The entire drive home from the lake felt like a blur, as if my mind couldn't decide whether to panic or plan. My heart was hammering, my throat dry, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that suitcase sinking deeper into the cold, dark water. What could she be hiding? Clothes? Money? Or something much worse? The thought made my stomach twist. I didn't want to believe she was capable of something truly evil, but the fear had already taken root inside me. When I reached home, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wall clock. It's ticking louder than usual. My teacup trembled in my hand. Part of me wanted to go to the police, but what would I say? My daughter-in-law threw a suitcase in the lake and I think it's suspicious? They'd laugh, tell me I was imagining things. No, I needed proof, real proof. And to get it, I'd have to go back. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me jump. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside. Soft, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. I peeked through the curtains, and there she was, Emma, standing under the dim streetlight, her face pale, her body still as stone. She was looking straight at my house. My breath caught in my throat. She stayed there for almost a minute, then turned and disappeared into the dark. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next morning, I went back to the lake. The air was cool, the water calm, as if mocking me for returning. I brought a long stick and my phone, ready to record anything I found. The suitcase wasn't visible, of course. It had sunk. I waded in a little, the icy water biting at my skin, and poked around where she had thrown it. Nothing. But then I noticed something small and shiny near the reeds. A silver chain tangled in the grass. I picked it up and my heart dropped. It was Daniel's. I recognized it instantly. I had given it to him on his 18th birthday. I staggered back, almost slipping in the mud. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Why was his necklace here? He never took it off. My breath quickened, tears stinging my eyes as my mind raced through every terrible possibility. Was Daniel in that suitcase? No, it couldn't be. I refused to believe it, but the dread was too strong to ignore. When I got home, I called Daniel again. His number still went straight to voicemail. "Hey, Mom, leave a message," his recorded voice said, cheerful and distant. I left one, then another, then another. Still nothing. Days went by, and Emma acted as though everything was normal. She posted pictures online, smiling at restaurants, holding wine glasses, pretending life was perfect. But Daniel wasn't in a single one of them. When I asked, she'd simply say, "He's busy. You know how work is." I started watching her more closely. Whenever she saw me, her smile seemed forced, her eyes nervous. Once I asked if she'd heard from Daniel, and she froze for a second before forcing out, "He's fine, just tired." Her tone had that sharp edge again. That was the moment I knew she was lying. A week after the lake incident, I decided to confront her indirectly. I pretended to know something. Over tea at her house, I looked her straight in the eyes and said softly, "I went to the lake the other day. Such a peaceful place, isn't it?" She almost dropped her cup. Her fingers twitched. "The lake?" she repeated. "What were you doing there?" I smiled politely. "Just walking. You know, people throw the strangest things into lakes." Her face drained of color. For a split second, real fear flashed across her expression. But then she smiled again, a brittle, fake thing. "I wouldn't know," she said quickly. That was all the confirmation I needed. She knew that I knew something, and that made her dangerous. That night, I couldn't stop replaying everything. The phone call, the necklace, the suitcase, her trembling voice. I had to be sure. I called one of Daniel's colleagues, someone I knew from his firm. "Is Daniel still on leave?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a pause. "On leave? Ma'am, Daniel hasn't worked here for almost 2 months. We thought he'd taken another job." My stomach dropped. 2 months? I hung up and sat in silence, the room spinning. 2 months. He hadn't called, texted, or visited in all that time. And the last person to see him alive was Emma. I wanted to go to the police right then, but something stopped me. The fear that she'd find out before I could prove anything. If she really had done something to Daniel, she'd know I was getting close, and she'd stop me. No, I had to be careful. The next day, I made a plan. I'd go back to the lake with help. Not the police yet, but someone I could trust. I called my neighbor Tom, a retired fisherman who knew the lake better than anyone. I told him I'd lost something valuable and needed help retrieving it. He agreed to meet me early the next morning with his small boat and some nets. That night, I double locked my doors, sat by the window, and kept watch. Around 2 a.m., I saw a shadow again, tall, slender, moving near my gate. My heart leapt into my throat. I stayed quiet. Lights off. The figure lingered for a moment, then left. I didn't sleep at all after that.
At sunrise, Tom and I were already at the lake. The mist floated low, curling over the water. I pointed to the spot. There, I whispered. He looked at me, confused, but said nothing. We rowed out slowly, and he began dragging the net. Minutes passed. My stomach was tight, my palms sweating. Then suddenly, there was resistance. Something heavy caught in the net. My breath caught as Tom pulled. The boat rocked, water sloshed, and then it surfaced. The same dark suitcase. It was bloated from water, covered in mud and weeds. My heart pounded as Tom hooked it and dragged it onto the boat. He gave me a concerned look. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He unlatched the buckle with a shaky hand. The smell hit us first. A mix of decay and dampness. I covered my mouth, trembling. Slowly, he lifted the lid. What we saw inside made me gasp so hard my vision blurred. It wasn't what I thought, but it was still something that would change everything.
Inside that waterlogged suitcase lay a bundle of soaked documents, a few plastic-wrapped envelopes, and something that made my breath hitch. A small, velvet jewelry box that I instantly recognized. It was Daniel's grandmother's ring, the one he had promised to keep safe until he passed it on someday. I felt my chest tighten. What was his ring doing here, buried at the bottom of a lake? I opened the envelopes with trembling fingers. Inside were cash bundles, thick, damp, and tied with rubber bands, along with printed papers that looked like bank statements and signed property transfer deeds. I squinted through the smeared ink and felt a chill crawl down my spine. Everything, our old family house, Daniel's savings, his name, was being transferred into Emma's. My stomach turned. This wasn't just about money. She had planned something far more sinister. The document showed Daniel's signature, but something about them looked off, too neat, too deliberate, forged, maybe. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped the papers. I could barely process what I was seeing. She was trying to erase him, to take everything he owned. But why hide the evidence? Tom looked at me concerned. "You need to take this to the police," he said, his voice low. I nodded numbly, but deep inside, fear was coiling tight around my heart. If she was desperate enough to hide this, what else was she capable of? As soon as I reached home, I spread the documents on my table, drying them under a small fan. The ring sat beside them, gleaming faintly. I couldn't stop crying. Every tear that fell seemed to blur the lines of betrayal a little more. Then I heard a sound. Footsteps on the porch. Slow, steady. I turned off the fan and held my breath. A knock, sharp, deliberate. I didn't move. Then came her voice. "Mom, are you home?" I froze. She'd never come to my house uninvited before. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "I wanted to check on you," she called again, her tone sugar-sweet, but with something dark underneath. I quickly gathered the documents, stuffed them into a kitchen drawer, and forced my face to calm before opening the door. There she was, standing on my porch in her perfect white blouse, holding a plate of cookies like some scene out of a nightmare. Her smile was flawless, her eyes sharp as glass. "I thought I'd bring you something," she said, stepping inside before I could say anything. Her perfume filled the room, a scent that now made me nauseous. "Thank you," I managed to say, forcing a smile. "That's very kind of you." She looked around, her eyes scanning everything too deliberately. "You've been quiet lately," she said, lightly. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." Just tired," I replied. Her gaze landed on the damp towel I had left on the table. For a brief moment her expression shifted, something flickered behind her calm mask. "Been doing laundry?" she asked. "Something like that," I murmured. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "You know," she said, softly,
Daniel used to say how much he admired your honesty. He really trusted you. The way she said used to made my skin crawl. I felt my nails digging into my palms as I asked, when exactly was the last time you spoke to him? She blinked, clearly not expecting that question. Oh, last week maybe. Funny, I said quietly, because his office says he hasn't been to work for 2 months. Her eyes darted toward mine, then away. Well, maybe they're mistaken. Are they? I whispered, taking a step closer. Because I'm starting to think you're the one mistaken, Emma. The air between us tightened. For the first time, she didn't have a rehearsed response. Her jaw clenched and her eyes darkened. She set the cookies down slowly, almost too carefully. You've been snooping, she said, her voice dropping lower. I've been worried, I shot back. My son has vanished, and you're out throwing things into lakes. Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her face before she composed herself again. You shouldn't make accusations like that, she said, her voice now trembling ever so slightly. I leaned in. Then tell me where Daniel is. She didn't answer. For a long, tense moment, we just stared at each other, the silence so sharp I could hear the ticking of my wall clock. Then she smiled again, the kind of smile that didn't belong on any human face. You'll see soon enough, she whispered, turning to leave. The moment the door clicked shut, I felt the weight of her words settle like the stone in my chest. You'll see soon enough. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, clutching Daniel's ring, staring out the window. She was hiding something, but now she knew I was on to her. I didn't have much time. The next morning, I made copies of every document and slipped them into a folder labeled Daniel. I hid one in my attic and another under the floorboard of my bedroom. If anything happened to me, I wanted the truth to survive. Then I went to the police. At first, they listened politely, taking notes as I explained everything. The missing son, the suspicious daughter-in-law, the suitcase, the documents. But when I mentioned finding the ring and the property transfers, their expressions changed. We'll look into it, the officer said carefully. We'll also need that suitcase and the papers. Relief washed over me. Finally, someone was going to help. But the relief didn't last. That evening, when I returned home, my front door was slightly open. My stomach dropped. I stepped inside slowly, the floor creaking beneath my feet. The house was quiet, too quiet. The drawer where I had hidden the documents was empty, gone, every trace of evidence wiped clean. And on the kitchen table, a single note in neat handwriting, "You shouldn't have gone to the lake." My knees almost gave out. She had been here in my home. That night, I didn't turn on the light. I sat in the dark, clutching Daniel's ring, the house cloaked in silence except for the wind scraping against the window. But I wasn't afraid anymore. No, I was furious. That was the night I decided if the police wouldn't uncover the truth, I would. And I was going to make Emma confess, no matter what it took.
The confrontation came like a storm I had been brewing for months, sudden and inevitable. And the first words I said broke the air like glass. Emma, I need to talk now. She was standing in my kitchen as if she owned the place. The same calm mask, the same polite voice, but this time there was no fear in her eyes, only that cold, practiced patience that had always unsettled me. I could feel every neighbor's house like a heartbeat around us, their windows anonymous witnesses. And for the first time, I didn't care who heard. I had baited the trap carefully. I had Tom, who knew the lake and could confirm the suitcase's recovery, waiting in my car with the recorder, and I had the police on standby, just far enough away that they wouldn't spook her. I laid the wet deeds, the smeared signatures, and Daniel's ring on the table like evidence in a trial and watched the way her fingers twitched when she noticed them. She tried to smile, the practiced tilt of lips, the polite inflection, but it faltered. "What is this?" she asked, voice brittle. "Oh, that? Must be a mistake."
Her hand rested on the back of a chair as if steadying herself, but I was the one who steadied my voice. I found them at the lake, Emma, your suitcase, the one you threw in there. I found Daniel's necklace in the reeds. These transfers, our house, his account, signed in his name, going to you. I watched the color drain from her face in slow motion, the way her pupils constricted like shutters closing against light. For a second, I thought she might vomit. Instead, she laughed, sharp, small, absolutely not human, and said, "You're making wild accusations." "Am I?" I asked, and I let my anger shine through, but it was calm now, the controlled kind that terrifies people who thought they had power over you. "Daniel has been gone for 2 months, Emma. His colleagues say he's not at work. His phone—" I paused, picturing him with his hand always on the phone, the way he once called me every Sunday without fail. The smell of his jacket when he hugged me, the warmth he left in a chair. His phone goes to voicemail. I found his ring in the suitcase. I heard you on the phone saying it had to stay hidden. Her eyes narrowed. She took a step back as if the floor had become lava. "How dare you come into my home?" she snapped, forcing herself to anger. "You don't know anything." "I know enough." I leaned in, my voice a low, steady thing, and I told her about the nights I'd sat awake, about the muffled crying I heard once through their thin walls, about the way she shrank any space my son used to occupy with someone else's presence. I told her how I had watched her leave on Wednesdays with that suitcase, and how I had followed. I watched her swallow the lies the way some people swallow pills, fast, without savoring. Then I pulled out my phone and played the recording Tom had made. In his car, her voice at the lake, the cracked panic when she whispered about no one finding out, and if she suspects anything, I'll take care of it. The sound of her voice coming from a device was like hearing a ghost accuse you. It was her, recorded and undeniable. She went white. For a fraction of a second, I saw the woman behind the mask, a flicker of fear, then calculation like a hand closing a lid. She reached for the ring on the table, fingers trembling, and I slapped my hand down before she could touch it. "Don't," I said. "You'll only ruin whatever's left of your defense." Her breath hitched, and in that instant, I realized she was no longer trying to play a part. She was improvising, the skill set of a desperate person. "You're mad. This is manipulation. You're trying to ruin a marriage." "I'm trying to save a life," because I didn't know if Daniel was dead or alive, and the uncertainty was a weight I couldn't carry alone anymore. "If you didn't hurt him, tell me where he is." The room held its breath. She looked at me like a particularly annoying fly, then her face softened in a way that almost fooled me. "Daniel left me. He left me. He was unhappy. He signed things without thinking. I am just trying to secure our future." Her hands fluttered like dry leaves, my teeth clenched. "You threw a suitcase in the lake, Emma. You destroyed evidence. You've been forging transfers. You lied." Her laugh this time was ugly and raw. "What do you want me to say? That I'm a gold-digging witch? That I pushed him?" She stepped forward, the actor the world had always applauded, the woman who knew exactly which words made people back down. "I loved him." And she added the word came out false as counterfeit money. "I thought I could save him." "Save him from what?" I demanded. The clock ticked small and merciless. She opened her mouth and closed it. The type of person who keeps a secret has practiced how silence can be as loud as confession. We argued, she admitted, finally, a slow, damaging admission. Things happened. He was difficult. I remembered Daniel's gentle eyes, the way he always tried to fix the world for others and forgot to fix himself. My anger wanted to roar. My grief wanted to collapse into a quiet corner and disappear. Instead, I stayed present. "If he left because of you, tell me where he is," I said again. She looked away, and now, finally, the mask slipped. Tears, real, ragged, broke free. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "We argued about money, about the house. Daniel, he promised things he couldn't keep. He found out about some debts. He was afraid. He said he would handle it." Her voice trailed. I panicked. "Panicked how?" I asked, though I knew I hated the answer. She swallowed. "He threatened to leave me if I didn't do something. He said he would take everything and leave me with nothing. I tried to talk to him. He was cornering me."
Her hands shook. I never wanted to hurt him. I could see the raw edges of someone who had been pushed into a corner and decided the only way out was to push back. But the thing about being pushed is that sometimes the person pushing falls into places you can't imagine. Where is he now? I asked, hearing the pleading in my own voice. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were empty and honest. He's not dead, she said, and the words were both relief and a fresh kind of terror. He's gone. I don't know where. He left 2 months ago after a fight. He packed a bag and said he needed air. I begged him to stay. He left a note. A note. My mind raced with hope, but hope without proof is dangerous. Why the documents, the transfers, the suitcase? I demanded. She flinched. I didn't like who he was becoming, she said. We had debts. I thought if I moved the house into my name, I could protect myself. I thought I could control things. The suitcase? I panicked. I meant to burn the papers. I didn't think he'd notice. She looked down, shame seeping through her like water. I didn't mean for him to vanish. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to that thread of mercy and pull it tight until it warmed everything. But the ring on the table, Daniel's ring, seemed like a lighthouse in the middle of betrayal and pointed only to the hard fact. Something had been stolen. Time, trust, maybe more. And the trail went straight through her hands. I told her I had already spoken to the police, that they were ready to follow up, that Tom had recorded her voice at the lake and would confirm the suitcase had been hers. The look on her face when I said police was not fear of arrest. It was the fear of being known, of the polished life she'd built cracking. You can call them, she said tentatively. Call them and find out. You'll see I didn't kill him. I'm not accusing you of murder, I said. And it was true. I wanted answers more than vengeance. I want where he is. She swallowed, then reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled scrap of paper. Her hands trembled so badly I thought she might drop it. This is a hotel receipt. 2 months ago. He left a note, said he'd be gone for a while. He took some money. He packed his camera and left. He handed me the receipt. The hotel name was smudged but legible, a cheap place on the edge of the city. Why would he leave without telling you? I whispered, because in that question lay all the nights I had spent waiting for a phone call. He felt trapped, she said. He thought I wanted everything. I tried to show him. Her voice broke. I thought of the way he used to call with small daily joys, the way he told me about a new building he admired or the funny thing his coworker did, and the silence that replaced it was louder than any scream. I could take her at her word. I could let the police track down the hotel and see if Daniel had checked in under a different name. I could follow this trail to the end. But my heart, battered and raw, said something else. I needed to see him myself. I needed him to tell me he was okay. I needed to know he hadn't been pushed into a lake or a shallow grave or an unforgivable decision. Emma looked at me with desperation. Part apology, part plea, like a child asking not to be abandoned to the consequences of her choices. I felt my anger soften, but not enough to forgive or forget. There was still so much to prove, so many questions that could not be answered by her trembling confession. We'll go to the police together, I said finally, and when I did, she breathed as if released from a weight. We'll tell them everything you've just said. Her hands were folded in her lap, like a woman waiting to be judged. If you're telling the truth, I added, my voice quiet but iron. And if Daniel comes back, we will find a way to make this right. If you lied, I didn't finish the sentence because sometimes silence can be a blade as effective as words. She nodded, the movement fragile and small. As she stood to leave, she paused at the doorway and turned back. I'm sorry, she whispered,
And in that whisper, I heard the beginnings of remorse, or perhaps the tremor of fear at consequences finally catching up. I closed the door behind her and felt the house exhale with me. I called the police and told them to meet me at the station. I dialed Tom to tell him to bring the recorder and the suitcase evidence. My hands were shaking not with fear anymore, but the electric pulse of someone who had forced the truth into the light. But even as I moved, that small, insistent thought haunted me. If she was telling the truth about him leaving, why did his belongings seem so abandoned? Why did his life look like it had been erased by careful hands? And more importantly, would finding him be the end of this story or the beginning of something far darker?
I don't know how long I stood there by that lake, staring into the still, murky water where the suitcase had vanished. The ripples had long faded, leaving only my reflection staring back at me, a tired, worried woman with too many questions and not enough answers. I knew I couldn't just walk away, so I went back home, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be inside? Why was she so desperate to hide it? And most of all, what was she hiding from Daniel? I tried to convince myself it could be something harmless. Old clothes, personal belongings, maybe something sentimental she wanted to forget. But the way she looked around before throwing it in, that wasn't guilt. That was fear. The rest of that day, I couldn't focus on anything. I burned the tea I was making, forgot where I put my phone, and kept glancing out the window as if she might appear. When Daniel called that evening, his first call in weeks, my heart skipped a beat. But his tone was flat, distracted. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Is everything okay?" I wanted to tell him what I'd seen, but something in me hesitated. If she was hiding something dark, and I told him without proof, he might not believe me. Worse, it could drive him further away. So I just said softly, "Everything's fine, dear. How are you?" He hesitated too. "I'm okay. Emma's been a bit stressed lately, but we're managing." Stressed. That word echoed in my mind like a riddle. Stressed about what? That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment, the splash, the look on her face, the way she exhaled as if releasing a secret she'd buried deep inside. By dawn, I made a decision. I would go back to that lake. I needed to know what was in that suitcase. I put on my oldest shoes, grabbed a flashlight, and drove out before the sun rose. The fog was even thicker that morning, curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. The lake looked different, colder, quieter. I could almost feel it holding its breath, guarding her secret. I found a long branch and waded in just enough to test the water's depth. The mud sucked at my boots and every sound seemed amplified. The chirping birds, the water lapping against my legs, my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I poked around, searching blindly, when something metallic scraped against the branch. My pulse jumped. I knelt down, hands trembling, and felt it again, solid, heavy, just beneath the surface. It took all my strength to drag it closer, and when I finally saw the corner of that soaked suitcase glinting under the gray light, I almost couldn't believe it. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at it. My mind screamed to open it, but my body froze. What if I found something I couldn't unsee? What if it was proof of something terrible, something that could destroy my family? My hand hovered over the latch, shaking. Then, slowly, I unclipped it. The smell hit me first, damp, musty, and faintly metallic. Inside, layers of clothes clung together, soaked and heavy. I pushed them aside with trembling fingers until I saw it. A photograph. My son, Daniel, holding a baby I didn't recognize. And next to him, another woman smiling softly, her hand on his shoulder. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at that picture for what felt like forever. The baby couldn't have been more than a few months old. My mind refused to accept what my eyes saw. Was this before he married Emma?
Was that woman his ex? Or was this something much more recent? Something Emma had just discovered? My knees gave way and I sat in the cold mud, the photograph shaking in my hands. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her tension, the arguments, the distance. She had found something Daniel had kept hidden, and now she was trying to erase it. But the question that burned deepest wasn't about what I saw. It was why she didn't tell anyone. Why throw it away? Why hide it like a secret that could ruin her? My heart ached for both of them. But beneath that ache, another feeling began to grow. Determination. I had to know the truth. And this time, I wasn't going to sit quietly and watch my family fall apart. That was the moment I decided to confront her. Not in anger, not in panic, but with calm, deliberate truth. Because whatever this was, it had already gone too far.
I spent the next 2 days in a quiet storm of thought, trying to piece together what the photograph meant. Every time I closed my eyes, that image replayed in my mind. My son, holding a baby I'd never seen, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. The baby had Daniel's eyes, that soft, uncertain smile that he always had when holding something precious. It couldn't be a coincidence. The longer I thought about it, the more I realized Emma must have found it first. That was why she looked so haunted lately, why she'd started acting distant. She wasn't just throwing away an object, she was trying to bury the truth. But the truth has a way of floating back to the surface. I kept that photo locked in a drawer, hidden inside one of my old recipe books, and watched Emma closely. I invited them over for dinner that weekend, pretending everything was normal. I needed to see them together, how they looked at each other, how they spoke. When they arrived, I immediately noticed the strain in Daniel's face. He looked thinner, older. Emma, on the other hand, was polished as always, her makeup flawless, her smile practiced, but her eyes gave her away. Every time Daniel reached for her hand, she flinched. Just slightly, but enough for me to see it. Over dinner, I asked simple questions, watching their reactions. "So, how's everything going, dear? You both look tired." Emma laughed lightly. "Oh, just work stress. You know how it is." Daniel nodded too, quickly. "Yeah, nothing serious." But their eyes didn't meet once. The silence between them was louder than any argument. I wanted to scream. Tell me the truth. But I held my tongue. The truth had to come from them, or at least from what they revealed under pressure. After they left, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I called Daniel the next morning. "Son," I said softly, "is everything okay between you and Emma?" There was a pause, a long one, before he sighed. "Mom, I don't know anymore. She's been acting strange. Keeps going through my phone, my things. I don't even know what she's looking for." My heart sunk. She didn't trust him because she had already found something. "Have you ever hidden something from her, Daniel?" I asked, holding my breath. He sounded confused. "What? No! Why would I?" His confusion felt too real to be an act. For a second, I wanted to believe him that maybe the photograph was from long ago, something innocent. But then I remembered the way Emma's hands shook as she threw that suitcase. No, there was more to this. That night, I saw Emma again. She came to my house alone, saying she wanted to talk. Her voice was calm, too calm, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. She just wanted to clear the air, she said, sitting across from me. I folded my hands on the table, watching her. "You're right, I am worried." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Daniel and I have had some misunderstandings, but I love him and I don't want you to think otherwise." Her tone was measured, almost rehearsed. I wanted to ask about the suitcase, the photo, everything, but I stayed quiet, letting her fill the silence. And she did. "Sometimes," she continued, "we all have to let go of things that hurt us, even if it means doing things others won't understand." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word,
and I knew she was talking about that morning at the lake. I leaned forward. "Emma, what did you let go of?" Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Her eyes glistened, and she whispered, "You wouldn't understand." Then she stood up and left. That sentence stayed with me. You wouldn't understand. It wasn't guilt I'd seen in her eyes. It was grief. I began to wonder if maybe she wasn't the villain in this story. Maybe she was the one trying to protect herself. Maybe Daniel had secrets too, ones even he wasn't ready to face. I didn't know who to believe anymore. But one thing was certain. That suitcase wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something far darker. And I wasn't done digging.
The days that followed felt heavy, like walking through thick fog where nothing was fully clear, but everything pressed down on my chest. The photograph sat hidden in my drawer like a ticking clock, each hour pushing me closer to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. Emma's words, "You wouldn't understand," echoed in my head over and over again. I tried to distract myself with small things, cooking, cleaning, walking around the garden, but my thoughts always circled back to the lake, the suitcase, the picture, and that woman with the soft smile standing beside my son. I decided to find out who she was, quietly, carefully, without letting Daniel or Emma know. I went through an old album, searching for any clue, but there was nothing. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called one of Daniel's college friends, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Do you remember any girl from Daniel's past?" I asked as casually as I could. There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Oh, you mean Leela?" My heart skipped a beat. Leela. I'd never heard that name before. She and Daniel were practically inseparable in college. Everyone thought they'd get married. But then she disappeared one summer, and he never talked about her again. I hung up the phone with my hands trembling. Leela. So that's who the woman in the photograph was. And that baby. Could it be theirs? A past he never told us about? A life buried in silence? The thought made my stomach twist. I had always trusted Daniel, always believed he was honest. But what if he had kept something this big from us? From Emma? I couldn't keep quiet anymore. That night, Daniel came over after work. I sat him down at the kitchen table, the same place I'd sat him 1,000 times when he was a boy with scraped knees and messy hair. But this time, the air between us was different, heavy, fragile. "Daniel," I said softly, "I need you to tell me the truth. Who is Leela?" His face drained of color instantly, and his lips parted as if I'd just pulled a secret out of him he thought was buried forever. He didn't even try to pretend. "Mom," he whispered, running a hand over his face. "How do you know that name?" His voice cracked. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "Because I found something, Daniel. Something at the lake." He froze, every muscle in his body tensing. What do you mean, the lake?" I swallowed hard. "I followed Emma. I saw her throw a suitcase into the water, and inside it I found a photo. You, a baby, Leela." He didn't move for a long time. Then he let out a shaky breath, leaning back in his chair like the air had been punched out of him. "I should have told you," he said quietly. "I should have told everyone." I felt my chest tighten. "Told us what, Daniel?" His eyes glistened with tears. "That baby is mine." The room spun for a moment. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. He looked so small then, not the grown man I raised, but a boy caught in the middle of a storm he created. "Leela got pregnant in our last year of college," he said, voice trembling. "We were young, scared.
She wanted to keep the baby. I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father, so I ran. I told myself it was for the best, that I'd make things right later, but I never did. A year after I met Emma, Leela came to me. She wanted help. I tried, but I was already engaged. I thought I could just separate the two lives, pretend one never happened. Tears burned my eyes. Daniel, I whispered, you can't just erase a child. His shoulders shook as he pressed his palms to his face. I know. And Emma found out. She found everything. The letters, the photos. She was furious. I thought she'd leave me, but instead she said she'd handle it. I didn't ask how. I was too afraid. A chill ran down my spine. She said she'd handle it? That meant the suitcase wasn't just her hiding her pain. She was trying to bury his secret, their secret. That was the weight she carried to that lake. Not guilt, but betrayal. She wasn't the only one lying. So was my son. I sat there in silence, listening to the sound of his shaky breathing. And beneath all the hurt, I felt something else rising. Resolve. Secrets like this didn't stay buried forever. And whether they liked it or not, the truth was already clawing its way to the surface. I looked him in the eye, my voice steady. Daniel, this isn't something you can run from anymore. He lowered his head, whispering, I know, Mom, but I'm scared of what happens when everything comes out. So was I. But fear wasn't going to stop the truth. Not anymore.